Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. This is week 8, and I'm going to go through every single matchup. I'm also going to go through these in the short form like I've done before, so it'll be up to you to pause and look at any relevant information that's important to you. I will try to highlight a few pieces, but I'm just going to run through them pretty quickly. And getting into the first Sunday matchup here, you have Miami at Atlanta, with Atlanta favored on the money line, and a spread of 7 points, with a total line of 44.5. So just a few things to note right off the bat from the rankings are that Miami is not very good offensively, being one of the worst teams for both passing and rushing, as well as scoring. They're also very bad at stopping their opponents from scoring, and very bad at stopping them from rushing. With Atlanta, you have one of the best at stopping the pass and one of the best at stopping the tight ends. Those kind of typically go hand in hand, but it is interesting to see if they diverge. You also have a pretty good team at stopping scoring, although they're not very good at scoring themselves, but they are one of the better rushing teams in the league. Changing over to the averages if you need to look at these in more detail. And I just want to point out how these numbers match up here, where you have your allowed passing rank and allowed tight end rank of 1, meaning they allow some of the fewest yards in the league, which is reflected down here, with an average of 156 average passing yards per game and less than 20 average allowed tight end yards per game. The last interesting thing to point out here is if I go back to the total, you can see that there's been 10 interceptions from Miami this season. So your quarterbacks for this game are Tua for Miami and Michael Penix for Atlanta. They have very similar fantasy totals, almost 80 points total, with an average then of Tua having 11.4 and Michael Penix with a slightly better average of 13.1. Tua has 10 interceptions on the season and 1 fumble lost to a sack. He has 4 rushing fumbles but hasn't lost any of those. Michael Penix has 3 interceptions from the season and 1 loss due to a sack. I'll flip the tabs over to the averages now so you can look at those. And of course you have your breakdown week by week if you're interested in that. So I fixed up this piece down here a little bit too, so there's less crowding of those who have very few carries on the season, one-offs or something like that. So these are more of the core people who carry for Miami. Here you have 2-0 with a small bit that might average about 7% of the carries. Obviously with the most being with A-Chain, but we'll see that in a bit. And similar story over here with Penix getting 9.5%. And then looking at the running backs with A-Chain and Robinson. Here you have 2 pretty good running backs scoring quite a bit this year, with A-Chain getting 136 total season points, averaging almost 19.5 average PPR points per game, and Bijan getting 145.4 season total points, which comes out to an average of 24.2 PPR points per game. Other than that, there's no turnovers between these two. And then flipping over to the averages. And of course, their breakdowns down here, if you're curious about any of that. And then I'll just kind of move that down if you need any more of that information. And then lastly, looking at just their carry share to just see how much they're sharing with any other backups or anything. You have A-Chain getting about 65% of the share of carries. And over here, you have Bijan getting 54.5% of the carries on the team, with almost 10% of that being stolen by the quarterback, but 32% of it being from Algier. And then taking a look at our number 1 receivers for this game, you have Jalen Waddle and Drake London. One thing to note here that I forgot on the quarterback screen was that Michael Penix and Drake London are both listed as questionable for this game, so you may want to look into that to make sure that they really do play. But other than that, you have Jalen Waddle with 88.8 total season points this year for an average of 12.7 fantasy points per game, and Drake London with 94.9 total fantasy points this season for an average of 15.8 PPR total points per game. And between the two, the only one with a fumble is Drake London. And then if I switch over for your averages, and of course your breakdowns are down here, and I'll move this guy over. Here's your breakdown here, since you did have some passing information, so that found its way in here. And I'm going to change the name here. This is actually receiving share. So if we look down their breakdowns, you get Drake London down here with 32.4% of the receiving share on the team. Also notably from before, Bijan Robinson actually gets 26, almost 27% of the receiving share on the team. So he actually gets a large portion. Second biggest receiver on Atlanta. And for Waddle here, it's a little bit more crowded, but it looks like he gets 29.6% of the receiving share right now from Miami. And for your number 2 receivers, Malik Washington for Miami and Darnell Mooney for Atlanta, with a total of 43 fantasy points, 6.1 in PPR. Darnell Mooney with 24.7, 6.1 per game. no turnovers between the two, and then switching over to the averages, as well as their week breakdowns. And then just looking at their share, you have Washington over here with this light slice where the numbers kind of gone for some reason, but I think that's about 7% of the receiving share on the team for being the number 2 receiver. Of course, a bunch of that's taken up by Tyreek Hill still here, even though he's not in, or he still holds some of that percentage over the season. Darnell Moody's over here with 10.1% of the team's receiving yards for Atlanta. And wrapping up with our tight ends, you have Tanner Connor, because Julian Hill is listed as out, and Kyle Pitts over here. Not much notable from Tanner in terms of fantasy, with Kyle Pitts having 64.5 total season fantasy points, averaging 10.7 in PPR formats. Just flipping over the averages, and no turnovers between the two either. And your breakdowns down here. And if we look at their percentages for the team, you have Tanner Connor getting 6.2% of the team's receiving share, and Kyle Pitts over here getting almost 20% of the team's receiving share. So this is one of the reasons why I want to have this breakdown, because you have Drake London over here, who has the largest share, but the second largest share of receiving yards on the team is the running back, which is Bijan Robinson. And then your third largest share is the tight end over here. So that kind of makes your other receivers kind of mute compared to the others and how they're favored on the team. So there's that matchup. I think that some of the notable takeaways is just that I think that Atlanta could definitely run all over Miami if they really wanted to. I think that you'll also see somewhat of a low-scoring game, since mostly they allow quite a bit, but I don't know if they score that much either to help each other. So there may be just a lot of field goals. So we'll see how it comes out. So there you have the details for this matchup. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did and you got something out of it, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Other than that, thank you so much for watching.